Why do we watch this shit? There's a seemingly infinite amount of fantastic prestige television and movies to watch, and instead, we watch dating shows. The use of we might be a tad presumptive, maybe you've written off watching any of this long ago. But every time you turn on Netflix or Hulu, there seems to be a new batch of dumb hotties staring back at you. Dating shows have increasingly become one of the most watched subgenres of content we consume today. And yet it's one of the types of shows we almost all unanimously believe as trash TV. Through the past 15 years, I've watched, or attempted to watch, pretty much every popular dating show that's been released. And yet it's taken a lot of soul searching to understand why I've been doing this. Do I hate myself? Or is there something that dating shows provide that I don't get in any other form of content? What started as a casual attempt to figure out why I love to hate watch dating shows quickly devolved into something much stranger. A journey through some of the most chaotic people ever to work in television. A look at how the darkest moments in modern history shaped what we see on screen. And an exploration of how our ideas of love and desire have evolved over time. First point of business, we gotta define what a dating show actually is. For something to be considered a dating show, I believe it needs to be two things. One, it must be unscripted reality TV. And two, the central theme of the show is for the participants to find a romantic connection. Okay, hear me out. But television was never supposed to be good. That was kind of the point of television, at least, when it was first gaining popularity. A large portion of television's allure was the idea of seeing something live, while not actually being there. TV studios were less focused on making scripted content, and more as a means to allow viewers to engage in something like they were there, whether that be news, sports, or music. And the shows reflected what could be easily transferable to a live studio audience. Instead of having actors memorize scripts and do each scene perfectly live, you could just have people come up on TV, play games, and see what happened. Game shows fit well into the live aspect of television because they use the mistakes of the contestants as a feature of the show, not a bug. Game shows began to pop up, the first being Spelling Bee in 1938, where contestants performed the dramatic stunt of spelling words correctly. The first reality television as we know it was Candid Camera, which debuted in 1948. The first reality TV ever put on air was a prank show, where real-life people were filmed in compromised situations and the footage of the pranks shown to a live studio audience that could laugh at them. This is, however, not the first idea for a reality show in recorded history. The first reality TV was actually made in Germany in the 1940s. Wait, Germany, 19... Okay, wait, let me take a look. Okay, bad news, guys. Turns out the first reality TV was actually Nazi propaganda. When I set out to make this video, I never thought I'd be talking about Hitler. And I certainly didn't think I'd be talking about him within the first 4 minutes of the video. There's World War II documentaries that take longer to mention him. Anyways. Not the best start to reality television, I think we can all say that. But there's a lot to look forward to. In the 50s, reality TV sees a huge increase in popularity, and into the turn of the 60s, we finally get to meet the two heroes of the birth of dating shows. And I don't know about you guys, but it can only be better than what we've just been talking about. So let's meet the two heroes. Let's start with number one. Number one is... Okay, so number one is Chuck Barris, who sounds like a TV producer. We'll get to know more about him. That should be exciting. And number two is Robert McNamara, the 8th Secretary of Defense for the United States of America. I'll get back to America's third favorite war criminal in a bit. But first, let's start with our good friend Chuck Barris. Chuck Barris was many things, as it turns out. He was a producer of a top 3 Billboard hit. He's one of the most important TV producers of all time. But above all else, he was a CIA operative with 33 confirmed kills, according to him and him only. During the span of the 1960s and 1970s, while he wasn't killing people of interest throughout Southeast Asia, Latin America, or the Middle East, he was opening the Pandora's box of what dating shows would become today. Chuck Barris was the head of daytime television at ABC. He was in charge of what game shows didn't make the air. He hated what he saw. It was all boring. It was just game shows of people stacking books on their feet, and that was pretty much it, from what I can gather. And he thought to himself, why not make something more interesting? Why not add an emotional resonance? If daytime television was always going to be boring, then let's spice it up a little bit. He quit. He quit and started his own production company and set out to make a style of television that had never been seen before. Little did he know that he would change TV and arguably human history the day that it aired.
From Hollywood, the dating capital of the world, in color, it's The Dating Game. And here's the star of our show and your host, Sham Las. How do you do? Thank you.
After hearing about LA as the dating capital of the world, which I personally have a bone to pick being a resident there, Jim Lange would come on screen and explain the rules. There were 3 suitors vying for the attention of one bachelor or bachelorette. In between the 2 groups was a door that would block out what they looked like. The bachelor or bachelorette would ask the suitors questions about themselves, and at the end of each episode, pick the person who they were most intrigued by. The chosen suitor and the bachelor would win the grand prize of a chaperone date, because who doesn't love going on chaperone dates in your 20s?
Congratulations, Peppy, and I tell you, if there's one town I enjoy talking about, Judy, it's a certain city by the bay where I hang my hat and my heart. And I know you two will agree with me when you go flying off for an exciting visit to San Francisco.
The Dating Game was an immediate hit, and Chuck Barris has a theory as to why.
And this was spontaneity. That was never ever in television before. I mean, there wasn't a correct answer to a question on the Dating Game or the Newlywed Game. So when a person asks what your favorite sandwich might be, it could be anything.
Bachelor number 3, is there anything wrong with you?
Well, yeah, I guess there's must be something wrong with me. I'm still single. Somebody must think so.
Oh.
The Dating Game was one of the longest running reality shows ever aired, and is one of the shows most credited with the revival in game show's second wave of mass popularity. I think we think of dating shows as kind of an inevitable concept in television. Of course, studios would get dumber and dumber and these kind of shows would get made. But at the time, the Dating Game was revolutionary. It completely redefined what the prize in a game show could be, and no show had really ever shown people just talking before and having an unstructured conversation. It was super simple. All you had to do was change the contestants. There are a ton of celebrity contestants that would come onto the dating show, either before or after they were famous. Every single person I've shown up until this point, actually, is a famous celebrity. There is a celebrity episode that's specifically infamous, and that was Michael Jackson's episode. And it was infamous because he was 13 years old at the time of the taping. It was seen more as like a cute thing back in the day. This Michael Jackson magazine talks about it. And for some reason, they talk about the girls as 3 itty bitty pretty ones. That person should not be allowed to walk the streets, in my opinion. The Dating Game is also infamous for having a serial killer on their show. Rodney Alcala was a serial rapist, child molester, and murderer. He had pre-existing sex crimes with a minor, and yet they didn't background check him.
Bachelor number 1.
Yes.
What's your best time?
The best time is at nighttime,
Why do you say that?
because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good. Then you're really ready.
Rodney Alcala won this episode, but would luckily be turned down by the Bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw. The Dating Game was a nationwide hit. ABC, in a bid to compete with CBS, continued to invest more into daytime television and renewed The Dating Game season after season. Critics, on the other hand, wrote it off as pedantic or low class. Most of the critiques I could find of The Dating Game amounted to essentially saying, "Aren't our wives dumb for liking this kind of thing?" There's specifically a critic, Rick Dubrow, who wrote several opinion articles disparaging the premise. He hated The Dating Game, saying that it had, quote, "such a greasy tone that one feels uncomfortably slippery merely by watching," which isn't even a harsh critique coming from this man. Rick Dubrow was a world-class hater, and as a hater myself, part of me has to respect that, but the other part of me just thinks he should have stuck to talking about MASH or something. He really, really hated The Dating Game, and had several, I counted up to 10 articles talking about how bad The Dating Game was. Also, as a complete side note, he's maybe the only reviewer to give the Beatles on Ed Sullivan's show a bad review, and Joyce Hansen of Eugene, Oregon had enough. She said, "Before, we've been tempted to write about his articles, but now as far as we and a lot of other people are concerned, he can, with his idiotic opinions, jump in a deep lake where he'll do the most good. Thank you, Joyce." Even though The Dating Game was hated by critics, or critic, it was popular enough with audiences that Chuck Barris sought to make another version of dating shows. But first, we gotta talk about the whole CIA operative thing. Okay, so Chuck Barris, in the early 1980s, wrote a memoir called Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, in which he said that he would switch in between being a TV producer and then being a CIA operative as he went on these chaperone dates. The CIA has come out and said it's all false, that none of this ever happened, he made it up for attention. And when's the last time the CIA lied about anything? The book would later actually be adapted into a full-length movie with Sam Rockwell and George Clooney. Fun fact. The CIA operative thing is probably false, right? He probably never did any of this, but I think it gives an important glimpse into the fact that all of this content was so unhinged at the time that it only made sense that the guy making them was equally insane. He was one of one. There's no one else like Chuck Barris. The Newlywed Game followed as another brainchild of Chuck Barris, where couples competed by answering fill-in-the-blank questions about their partner. It debuted on July 11th, 1966, a fateful day where two dominoes were beginning to tip. Across the globe, Vietnam was continuing to see the spread of communism into the southern region of the nation. On July 11th, 1966, Robert McNamara was set to give a speech talking about how the United States was quelling the spread of communism in Vietnam. The speech was set to broadcast on all three major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS. However, the press conference was delayed 30 minutes. ABC was set to air the premiere episode of The Newlywed Game. CBS was supposed to air the popular game show Password. With this 30-minute delay, the two networks had a decision to make: air their respective shows at the expense of missing the first part of the press conference, or wait until Robert McNamara came on screen to explain why bombing and murdering people across the globe was a good investment for Americans. CBS decided to post a standby message in preparation for the speech instead of airing Password. They had recently had movement with their executives in their network and wanted to be seen as both more patriotic and more reputable in their news coverage. ABC decided to air the Newlywed Game and wait for the press conference to begin. With less competition in the time slot for their premiere, the Newlywed Game enjoyed massive ratings. It would continue to enjoy these ratings for the next decade. Password would experience the exact opposite effect, losing ratings to the Newlywed Game and later being canceled 14 months later. It's entirely possible that the Newlywed Game would have been a success regardless of the Robert McNamara press conference that day. But I choose to believe that Robert McNamara, in trying to stop the dominoes tipping in the spread of communism, helped tip the dominoes of the spread of dating shows. The Vietnam War was constantly being shown throughout the late 60s and early 70s, leading to a cultural shift in TV viewing of escapism. Chuck Barris's shows were deemed to be time-killing shows. It's one of the first instances of this phrase being used in pop culture. Dating shows are repetitive, predictable, and melodramatic, which allows for a low barrier of entry to watch and enjoy these type of shows. When I posed the question about why we watch dating shows, many of you probably first thought of its easiness to watch, its bingeability. The Newlywed Game enjoyed equally high ratings, and was actually positively reviewed from an unlikely source. Yeah, even Rick DeBro liked it. In a shocking turn of events, Rick DeBro would end up hating the Newlywed Game, calling it low class within a year of his almost positive first review. But to harp on the bad critical reviews of dating shows throughout the years seems a little pointless. A TV critic telling someone that dating shows are bad television is kind of like someone telling you cigarettes cause cancer while you're at a terrible bar in Silver Lake smoking a cigarette. We know that already. I took the IMDb ratings of 100 different dating shows that have been on air through the years. 66% of them have an IMDb rating below 6, which can be deemed as bad television. 30% of dating shows are considered okay, and only 4% of them are deemed any good. What has changed, however, is the reasons that critics have hated dating shows. And what I found from the reception of the Dating Game and the Newlywed Game was less about the conversations being boring or the reactions being fake, like we may see with critiques nowadays, and more about how loose the morals of the contestants were.
Girls, tell me where specifically is the weirdest place that you personally, girls, have ever gotten the urge to make whoopee?
In the
No.
In the Butt Bob is the most famous clip from the Newlywed Game and also the Dating Game. In fact, Game Show Network rated it as the #1 moment in game show history. This clip was actually lost media for decades. Bob Eubanks, the host of the Newlywed Game, said that this never happened, but the Game Show Network found it years later and rated it as the #1 moment in the history of game shows, much to Bob Eubanks' chagrin.
In the Butt Bob is an urban legend. It'll probably be on my tombstone,
For the first time ever, families could watch TV about what their fellow neighbors were doing in the bedroom. As you can imagine, talking about sex so openly in the 60s and 70s was criticized as helping lead to the degradation of polite society. There's an irony to PTA meetings trying to ban the Newlywed Game or the Dating Game when we were murdering little children over a hypothetical situation we created. By the turn of the 70s, Chuck Barris couldn't capture the country's excitement as he'd been able to do with the Dating Game and the Newlywed Game, and The Gong Show, which is a talent show that was mostly about how untalented people were. It's important to note The Gong Show because Chuck Barris was also the host of this show, which increased his notoriety to a national stage. The average viewer now knew him as the creator of the dating game and the Newlywed Game, as a result of this fame. Whatever Chuck did would reflect his shows. And The Gong Show, as well as the extremely sexist $1.98 beauty show, were hated by critics, and the latter also being hated by most women the show was making fun of. What was the death note of Chuck Barris's empire was a show called Three's a Crowd. This show was similar to the Newlywed Game, except it was between a team of three this time: a husband, his wife, and his secretary. I'm always excited to learn about new dating shows, so, let's check it out. I'd never heard of this one.
With yours, every time they do that, we give them a point. Gentlemen, here's your first question. When it comes to sex with your secretary, have you been holding yourself back or letting yourself go?
Jesus, Chuck. What the fuck is this? Chuck knew it sucked. Not only were soap operas overtaking dating shows for viewership, but Chuck Barris had run out of ideas. He was at his wit's end. The criticism got to him. It's hard to keep making stuff when there's not a positive article to be found. I personally have combed through hundreds of articles, trying to find one nice thing about any of his shows at the time of airing. I found zero. Chuck Barris made the call. Cancel them all, he said. Critics cheered his exit, and fans of dating shows were left to wonder what the future of the genre held. After 1980, there was no dating shows on air for 2 whole years. In a lot of ways, Chuck can be seen as either the hero or the villain of this story. He created the genre that so many people hate, so many love to hate, and so many of us love. Chuck believed his shows wouldn't change the world. According to him, daytime television was, quote, the bargain basement of the arts. Daytime TV does not make meaningful statements. You begin and end with banal. Chuck is right to some extent, but I do think he's selling himself short in terms of these shows' overall importance. Chuck pushed the boundaries on what was socially acceptable to talk about in terms of sex and relationships in an extremely puritanic country such as the United States. Americans were a lot less forthcoming with their dating lives and sexual habits in the 60s and 70s. What I've come to find in my research is that dating shows aren't just a way to watch attractive strangers flirt with each other. They're a bookmark in the history of what was sexually taboo at the time of filming. Controversy drove ratings, and some might say these executives were exploiting rather than engaging in the discourse. But I believe the world to be a better place by demystifying sex. I can't say the same for the dating shows that would follow. It's probably time that I explain what these red lines and dots mean. You've probably gathered from watching so far that they have something to do with dating show popularity, and you'd be right. These red lines and red dots are part of a bigger graph that is charting the number of dating show seasons that occur in a given year. This graph is not available to the public, as I'm the one who came up with the data here. You see, I have taken the liberty and harrowing duty of tracking every single dating show that has ever made it to a major cable network and major streaming service. I gathered data on what kind of dating show they were, how many seasons they had, the date of each season, and what network or streaming service they were on. I have reached a level of unemployment previously thought not humanly possible. This graph can also be shown a different way, and that can chart what the types of dating shows we've seen. In my opinion, there are 3 prevailing subcategories of the dating show genre. And up until the 2000s, dating shows fall under what I dub the game for love category of dating shows. These types of dating shows are short form, usually 30 minutes long, non-serialized game shows. There's no follow-up episodes, no returnees, no reunions. Popular versions of this show include The Dating Game, Next, Love Connection, and Studs. Love Connection was the most popular dating show of the 80s. It was pretty similar to The Dating Game, except this time they would use video blurbs talking about themselves, and then the Bachelorette would pick who their favorite of the three was. The audience could also vote who their favorite of the three was, and if those both equaled the same thing, they were deemed to have a love connection. But this use of video blurbs was actually really popular in terms of the dating culture of the 80s. There were VHS aggregators, essentially like matchmaking services before dating apps and the web and the interwebs. What am I fucking... Anyways, you would submit a video of yourself and send it to the service. And then anyone else in the service would get videos of other singles in their area. This was specifically really popular in Los Angeles. And if you thought the dating pool was bad nowadays, you should check out what was going on in the 80s.
Hi, I'm Maurice. I'm an executive by day and a wild man by night.
Hi, I'm Fred. I'm looking for the goddess. Are you the goddess? Who is the goddess? The goddess is the woman, is a woman, is any woman, is all women.
I'm interested in most phases of data processing.
I'm really looking for somebody I can feel special about, and I don't encounter people like that very often, and I'm hoping you're one of them.
Of all the people I've shown so far, this is the one that I want to find love the most. He deserves it. I just know it. Love Connection ran over 2,000 episodes. It also had the kid from Stranger Things on it, which is pretty cool. After it was canceled, Studs would overtake it as the most popular dating show of the 90s. Studs is the show I want to focus most on between the 80s and 90s, and that's not because it was any good or really revolutionized the dating show genre. Studs is interesting because it was incredibly raunchy, even by today's standards. The premise of the show was two men went on unfilmed blind dates with the same three women, and then the group would all talk about their dates in front of a studio audience. Most of them talked about the sex that they had on these blind dates, or the body parts they liked the most about each other.
All right, we asked the ladies what their impressions were of you when they talked to you on the phone, Ron, and here's what they said. One of them said, rough, wild, and oh, so sexy. Second lady said, this guy is mucho macho. Third lady said, I got a date with Pauly Shore.
This date was not with Pauly Shore. It was with a man named Ron Goldman, who is most known for being the murder victim of O.J. Simpson along with his wife. When I set out to make this video, I never thought I'd be talking about O.J. Simpson. And I certainly... No, never mind. That's not what this documentary is about. Studs' talk of sex isn't particularly novel, but what makes this open discussion of sex with multiple different people notable is that this was at the height of the AIDS epidemic. It was a time in which casual sex was seen as its most dangerous. Health professionals around the country pleaded with Studs to talk more about safe sex, the use of condoms, how to get tested, things of that nature. The show was syndicated on Fox, and Howard Schultz, who was the executive producer of Studs, gave what is the most Fox answer possible when asked about if they should promote safe sex, saying, "It is not our place to give AIDS tests to participants. The responsibility rests with the individual. Whether or not people have sex on their dates is a decision made by the people involved. We neither encourage nor discourage it." Dating shows rarely talk about major current political and social events happening, especially dating shows before the pandemic. Contestants are placed in a vacuum, outside of the real world. They occupy a liminal space for viewers to imagine a world in which they could solely focus on their love lives. This lack of conversational depth is key for understanding why we can easily watch 8 episodes of Too Hot to Handle and also not retain a single thing anyone said. The discussion of politics and more emotionally charged topics would go against the grain of their inherent popularity as background television. But what's fascinating about this lack of political discussion is that our love lives are inherently political. They are an amalgamation of different societal, economic, racial, and gender factors that lead us to each other. Studs represents the most fundamental ethical question about reality and dating TV. How much should their reality reflect ours? And what do we lose when we don't reflect the totality of our actual experiences? Studs is, by my estimate, the first dating show to truly come under fire for not trying to represent the world we live in, and arguably intentionally misrepresent it. This is one of the reasons why Studs had its 15 minutes of fame, because it promoted a lifestyle that was too dangerous for the normal viewer to engage in. According to Rod Perth, who was the vice president of late night programming for CBS, quote, "It's a vicarious thing to watch these shows. Dating is very different these days than it was in the 70s, 80s, and especially the 60s. People have to be far more selective and discriminating." It's the earliest quote I could find talking about how dating shows are a vicarious viewing experience for people removed from the dating world, or for people that wanted to imagine a more attractive and lively dating life than the one that they had. This idea of aspiring to be the stud on Studs has been a growing reason for why we watch dating shows. With both COVID and the rise in virginity and lower romantic relationships, we are experiencing romance on a personal level less than we ever have before. Not me, though. What I'm doing with making this hours-long documentary about dating shows is extremely studly, and I don't yearn for the touch of another person at all. Anyways, the major trend of dating shows in the 80s and 90s was that the shows were marketed specifically for young adults and teenagers, and most of them could be found on late night time slots instead of during the day. The tone and content became much more sleazy. Many of the critics that had harped on the Newlywed Game and the dating game for being too sexual now said they looked tame compared to their 90s counterparts. When asked on The Conan Show what Chuck Barris thought of the new version of dating shows that the 90s had to offer,
Of spontaneity,
Yeah.
too, I guess.
Do you like these new shows now, like Studs and things like that? Are you a fan of those shows?
No, I don't know. I mean, I can't say things about other people's shows.
Right,
That's
right.
their stuff.
he gave a quick shake of his head in disapproval. Even Chuck Barris knew the genre was in dire straits. An idea that Chuck Barris thought would revolutionize TV now seemed destined to only be used to fill network time for a low budget. The 90s were coincidentally a massive boom for reality TV. Namely, The Real World not only was massively popular, but also had critical and cultural cachet as a fascinating depiction of the youth of America. Dating shows were the ugly stepsister, focusing on shock jock rage baiting and over-sexualized quips. The first 3 decades of dating shows had incredible highs. Well, they mostly had lows. Honestly, it was pretty much all lows. But we went from 1 dating season in 1965 all the way up to 4 whole dating show seasons in 1999. Not great. But if there's one thing this era of dating shows did better than any of the following eras, it was helping form a long-lasting connection. I tracked every couple that has gotten married on a dating show. This isn't perfect, but it's as close as I could get without being locked away in a cage and lobotomized. There have been 171 total marriages to my estimates coming from dating shows. 62 of those came from 1965 to the year 2000. And we have to remember that there were so many less dating shows being made back then. 90% of all dating shows that have ever made it to air are from the 2000s onwards. It becomes even more stark when I remove Married at First Sight from the total marriages, as that show starts with marriage first and then divorce second, generally. There were more marriages before The Bachelor even aired then all dating shows would contribute after. So for that reason, I don't deem this era to be a failure. For those 62 couples, it, but if only for a moment, had led them to fall in love with someone that made them incredibly happy. Our next dating show is proof as to why we probably got less marriages as time went on. Our good friends at Fox set out to bring dating shows to the new millennium. Fox's new pitch for dating shows would push the budget and the boundaries of what was socially acceptable in terms of a dating show. It would include 50 contestants this time as opposed to the 3 contestants we were accustomed to. The show was conceived by Mike Darnell with help from another Mike, Mike Fleiss. These 2 Mikes came up with the show that asked the age-old question: how could we combine the excitement of a wedding with the excitement of a beauty pageant?
Fox presents the most outrageous pageant ever. 50 women will compete to marry a mystery multimillionaire. She won't meet him till they say, "I do." A 2-hour event ending in a legal marriage on TV. Who Wants to Marry a Multimillionaire? Tuesday at 8 on Fox.
Romance was back in a big way. Who Wants to Marry a Multimillionaire debuted on February 15th, the year 2000. The show starts with 50 of the nation's whitest women introducing themselves each. Every contestant goes up and talks, and this takes 15 minutes long. So we're off to a raucous start. Then 40 of these women immediately get eliminated, never to be seen from again. Luckily, our host, Jay Thomas, had a very eloquently put plan for what would happen here.
And for those of you worrying about the runners-up, I will be having a special buffet for them in my room.
The millionaire, Rick Rockwell, just sits in the pod the entire time. He's barely shown. The final 10 lucky ladies then get to answer questions about George Bush.
Thank you.
Shanti Williams, it says here that you actually have met presidential candidate George W. Bush, and he played a prominent role in your past. Can you tell us about that?
My 6th grade class took a field trip to Arlington Stadium when he owned the Texas Rangers. I had a broken arm at the time, and he signed my cast.
So you mean you have a signature of a potential Republican loser in the nomination?
And then walk around in bikinis, where softcore porn music is played in the background. And finally, at the top 5, we finally get to meet our millionaire, who can truly be described as just a dude. In the end, he picked Darva Conger, and they share one of the worst kisses of all time.
Rick and Darva are going to be married right here. Don't go away.
And then they get married by an ordained minister. The 2 had talked face to face for less than a minute.
Authority vested in me as a district court judge in the state of Nevada, I pronounce you husband and wife.
This was one of the last dating shows I've seen, after watching over 1,000 hours of dating shows for this documentary. And because I have no life, but that's not the point. That's not the point. This show left me a broken man. I believe love might have died on February 15th, 2000. Just as we can pin many of the country's ailments at Reagan taking office, if you have struggled with your love life, I believe this show is fair game to blame for these troubles. This whole event left a terrible taste in my mouth. I wonder if there's anything good to watch after.
The tragic story behind the most notorious unsolved crime in U.S. history. The Jean-Benet Ramsey story, tomorrow at 9, 8 Central on Fox.
Finally, some real television. It quickly was reported by the New York Times and other news outlets that Rick Rockwell, the supposed millionaire, was actually more of an upper middle class failed stand-up comic that had a previous ex-girlfriend who had filed a restraining order, alleging that he had threatened to kill her.
He's probably the furthest thing from your typical millionaire.
in that he just seems to be an everyday type of guy that enjoys life, enjoys family.
Darva Conger broke off the marriage and lost her job as a result of being on the show. People magazine's front page after the event was titled TV's Wedding Fiasco, all about the millionaire, his bride, that restraining order, and a honeymoon that wasn't. Has TV gone too far? There are hundreds of bad reviews of Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire, but it went past just being a bad television show for most critics. It represented executives' willingness to put whatever they wanted on television for the masses to see, our worst ideas at our worst moments. TV Guide has it ranked as the 25th worst TV show ever made. A lot of critics would rank it even higher than that. The National Organization for Women declared Fox, quote, the network of shame. The show is actually ranked the second most sexist thing to come out that year, just behind CBS's version of the John Benet Ramsey story. Sandy Grunshaw, the then chairman of Fox and the winner for the worst headshot of anyone on Rotten Tomatoes, was furious with the reception, and he told Mike Darnell, who is second place for the worst headshot of anyone on Rotten Tomatoes, that, quote, I'd rather fail with quality than succeed with garbage. Because when you think of Fox, you think of quality.
The Jean Benet Ramsey story.
The follow-up special to the televised marriage was scrapped. Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire was supposed to be proof that dating shows could work as a major player in the TV ecosystem. It was over. At best, this would be daytime filler content. Wait, 22 million people watched it? Holy shit, it does work. No one liked it, and everyone watched it. It had more viewers than Friends or Monday Night Football averaged that year. 22 million viewers is absurdly high. For comparison, I made this graph to both piss myself off and piss you guys off by showing the most watched episode of some of TV's most beloved franchises. Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire got more viewers than any of these finales. It had double Breaking Bad's total finale viewership. The reception and ratings point to Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire as maybe the first mass hate-watched event in television history. It worked against all conventions of TV that executives had designed their programming around. Viewers weren't necessarily seeking out the best content, rather content that could elicit a strong emotion. There had been trashy reality TV up until this point, but nothing even came close to the viewership that Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire got. This was the final chance to stop dating shows spreading even further. What television studios looked at in front of them was a form of content so vehemently hated by the world that it would ruin their entire reputation. Cultural critics argued it had the ability to destroy the very fabric of how humans date. There had been no iteration of dating shows that hadn't pissed off the general public yet. And yet, it got 22 million viewers. I mean, I imagine the decision took these studios roughly 10 seconds, and Mike Darnell and Mike Fleiss were tasked by all major cable networks to make the next best or worst dating show. We had a chance to stop this. We didn't take it. Now we were gonna have to live with whatever came next.